Welcome back to the second episode of 21 Triangle podcast. Thank you for being with us here, Michael. I think today we want to talk about stress, motivation, and behavior.
Sure.
To start, let's look at the foundation piece of the puzzle, stress. At the workplace, we often talk about good stress versus bad stress. From a neurobiological perspective, what is the real role of stress? And how does too much stress affect our capacity to think and solve problems?
So the first thing I'd start is that in our society we say, stress is bad, you've got to avoid stress. And it's just not true. Without stress, we have no reason to do anything. When we have too much stress, that's bad because we're overwhelmed, we're unable to act, we're feeling it's too complex and too many things we don't know, or we're being micromanaged, or we haven't been given the resources, so things are out of control. So that's distressful. But stress is the foundation for motivation. It's what energizes us. Having whatever our right amount of stress is really important. There is a chart we may refer to here. It looks at the stress curve, and it shows us that at the lowest end, where there's very little stress, there's no reason to act. There's no reason to get up. There's no reason to do it because everything's fine. We have no stress. And that's not healthy for us. We evolve to need to do things. And at the other end of the scale, when we're feeling overwhelmed, that's not good for us either. But in the middle is an ideal place where stress energizes us, helps us prioritize, gives us a purpose, has us be productive, gets us moving. So the trick is not in trying to get rid of stress, it's in trying to have enough stress that we've got things to step up to, and not so much that we feel overwhelmed and out of control.
So you mentioned a 4-step flowchart for stress, from a stress to a behavior. Could you walk us through the first major insight you found regarding a stress? Especially, what is the deepest, most fundamental cause of a stress? So obviously, we talked about in a spectrum and a stress, and how in the middle we just now had that right level of a stress to motivate us.
Yes.
But how does this relate to gaps in basic human needs in a workplace environment, and how people can actually identify that right level of stress?
So the things that really cause us stress at a deep level are based in our subconscious motivational needs. And there's lots of theories about needs over the times. A lot of them are kind of not that accurate. Probably the most accurate and the ones that are based in facts are those that were developed by a guy called Graeber, who was the father of neuropsychotherapy. And he based his research on the work that had been done by a guy called Seymour Epstein. And his research was based on the best of the research before him. So it's a really good foundation. And what Graeber did is he found that the neurological underpinnings, so what's going on in the brain with each of these things, are they imaginary or do they actually live somewhere? And so that's the most reliable basis for why people feel compelled to do the things that they do. And he described them as general needs. In a workplace, we've probably had to adjust them a little so that they're appropriate. So, for example, and practical. So, for example, attachment, which is that really the family bonds, the really close stuff that people feel very distressed without and very drawn towards having. To call it attachment in work is probably a little bit pushing it. So I call it connection. So you still want to have a best friend at work. You still want to have some enjoyable, safe relationships and conversations. It's really necessary. Under Australian law, if you isolate somebody, that's part of bullying. I mean, even the government recognises that this is a core human need. And our research has found that most people regulate that pretty well. They choose a job and manage relationships not too badly. So it's highly distressing if it's not right. But most people, given the chance, manage it pretty well. If we start to interfere, then we can mess it up for them. So forcing people to do things, to attend events or to speak up or to be extroverted when they're not really, those sorts of things, that would be a violation. So that's going to cause them a distress because they can't control it. But it's one that people are pretty good at. Another one is just simple, and it's all dopamine based, and that's from you call it the pleasure principle, or that's what Freud called it, or whatever words you want. There are a few different. Basically, the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain, and that has us wanting to be stimulated, wanting to do things that are enjoyable, wanting to have to be challenged, but not so much that it's distressful. To do things that are interesting, to do things we've never done before. So it keeps us, and it to not be too hot or too cold or anything like that. So we want to be reasonably comfortable and to do things that are enjoyable and stimulating. So, for example, if we, in the workplace, if we allow people the opportunity to try new things, to extend themselves, to take on some variety, to do things that aren't just the same thing over and over, we're more likely to give people the opportunity to engage and to enjoy their work day, minute by minute, day by day, not just the big picture. Then we have one that we call empowerment. It comes from as humans, we need to take for granted that our environments are stable. If I changed the letters on your keyboard every day, you'd be really upset at me because it's all changed. Why is it changed? You need to take it for granted. You need to take how a door works for granted, that you can walk for granted, the road rules for granted. You need to take so many things in your life for granted so that you can focus on the exceptions. If we can't do that, we feel distressed. And we need to be able to act. So micromanagement doesn't allow us to act as we feel we should. So we really resent it. But if we're not given the information or resources, we really resent that too. So supporting and empowering people, so we call that empowerment. And so it's giving people the structures, the rules, and the resources, and then letting them go for it is really critical for engaging people. And then the last one is based on identity, who we are, who am I, how do I fit in, reputation, self-esteem, role, purpose, status within the hierarchy, all of those things. And where, again, we need to know where we fit, and we need to be able to protect that or perhaps enhance it if we can. So in a workplace, if we've got a workplace where people can manage their relationships, too many, not enough, that varies for people, but really close relationships is not a lot. That they can have some variety and challenge in their work and some stimulation, some interest, some learning opportunities, chances to do new things, that they feel they can act. Yes, told me that so many people tell me that they really like being told how it is by the boss, even if it's bad news. Tell me what it is and let me get on with it.
They need direction.
And let me go. Tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what it is you require, and then get out of my way. It's a really simple thing to do. Managers who have very high expectations or might worry about things going wrong a bit much or feel a high need for control themselves necessarily take control away from other people. So if I want to control everything that goes on in a certain space as the manager, that means they don't have control, which means they can't engage and they can't take ownership. So I need to put them in a position where they have ownership and control of the work that they do and the outcomes they achieve. And if that means they do A before B or B before A and it doesn't really matter, it doesn't matter. Just let them get on with it. And if they're not in a position where they can get on with it, well, what did I do as a manager to put them so far out of their depth that I wasn't able to catch them? So that's probably, if I look at the reasons why people become seriously disengaged with their work or avoid responsibility, it's this, hey, you just don't let me act. Or I'm being blamed for things that I don't believe are my responsibility or within my control. And then the last thing is, does somebody see, what are we doing to help somebody feel that they are the person they want to be seen as and the person they feel they need to be? And that's a matter of communication, of respect, of trust, of sharing purpose. And so if we do those things at work, we're creating lots of positive stress. Yes, you've empowered me. That creates a really positive stress. I don't feel the stress at all because I know what I can do to resolve it. You've given me the trust and the opportunity and the resources to solve that. That's highly motivating. Where if you don't do that, you're giving me a stress that I have no way of resolving it. And now I'm distressed, and now I'm upset, and now I'm reactive. So, as managers, if we can allow people, so a quick recap, allow people to manage their own relationships. Don't get in the way, don't force them to go to parties and be the center of attention if they don't want to. It's okay. Respect them for who they are. Reward them with respect and appreciation. Don't take them for granted. And don't be insincere about your compliments. That's not going to work very well either. And on a practical side, work that's challenging and enjoyable and varied that they have as much control over as possible. If we do those things, we're going to create really good stresses, really helpful stresses, because people feel they can manage it. If we don't do that, people feel out of control. They're going to be distressed, which means we're going to see fight or flight reactions, and either just going to distance themselves and say, no, I don't want anything to do with it, or they'll find a way of arguing or sabotaging or creating dissent or something like that. Yeah.
I think you kind of touched base on the second pieces of the puzzle, which is creating good motivation at work by recognizing good stress.
Yeah.
But I actually want to ask you a question in between.
Okay.
So you've mentioned about a stress and also the fear of change, right? So I'm going to use the word fear.
Yes.
Here.
Fear's a big one.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we often deal with as, managers, leaders, just trying to, well, like every other business, every now and then you go through the changes, right?
Yes.
Is there any way or suggestions that you have for leaders or managers or business owners to kind of control this fear of change within the team or within themselves? Because as managers, we also do have those insecurities as well, and the stresses, right? The stress of actually going to the team and say, hey, we want to make these changes. How are you going to?
The change is always a threat because it destabilizes people. Remember before I mentioned that we all need that stable platform to work from, and change unsettles that. And that's always unsettling for people. They're always going to resist it unless they really feel, no, this is really unsettled as it is. That will be more stable for me. So to engage with people and bring them along that journey, and there's a bit of management training about, stages of change and all that sort of stuff. An important part is to engage and to empower. Engage, inform, and empower. And maybe people have a different view. But generally, if they're absolutely stuck in the frame of mind, well, no, I'm not going to change for anything, that's difficult. But most people, and the people who are engaged with you and your goals and your values, will want to be part of that change. They might resist it initially, but if we consult and we say, hey, this is where we need to get to, the environment's changing around us, or this is the forecast if we don't make a change, these are our options, what do you think, guys? The more that we can do that with people who we've informed and who are engaged with the business and its goals, the more likely we're going to get some buy-in. And that's what we want. And it can just be somebody changing their parts of their job. It could be changing the direction of the business, which is fundamental, or it could be, hey, I want you to do less of that and more of this. It's still a change for that person. And we really, do just say, oh, don't do that, do that. Well, you've just totally disempowered me. You haven't given me any autonomy. I don't feel like I have a sense of control. My opinion is not valued. I'm now disengaging. Where if you explain to me, okay, this is where we're looking to go, I think it'd be really helpful if you could take some more of that on and let somebody else take care of that, or really we don't need to do so much of that. Then you're giving me an opportunity to buy into that.
Right. All right. I like it. Because now we talked about how we can kind of like enable the motivation.
Yes.
Right. So people often describe motivation as a feeling or a state of mind. But what's really happening in the brain? So the question is, what do you think that's actually happening in the brain when the motivation gets activated? And is motivation a feeling, a process, or something else entirely?
So The people who do the big tours and stadium events and stuff will tell you that it's, they want a feeling. It's all about the hype. And I would call that inspiration. It might link with some of your motivations and some of your fears and hopes, but really it's inspiration. You're wrapped up in the event. You think, oh, this is terrific. It feels really good. And, it's a really positive environment. But how much is actually different a week later for most people who go to those things? So it feels energizing, but that's not, unless it results in action, it's not motivation. So unless you do something differently, it was unsuccessful at being motivation. Unless you actually do something. Created a high, maybe made me feel bad about myself for not doing something. But if I didn't actually do it, it didn't succeed as motivation. So motivation comes from, so we spoke about stress, and stress is the gap between the fulfillment level that we require in the basic needs that we spoke of versus the level we're at or we fear or think we will be at in the future. So that can be to protect where we are. So I'll lose that if I don't do that. So that creates a stress. Or I can improve that if I do this. So that stress goes into the motivation system. And the motivation system there are three processes. One is reward anticipation is what it's called, but it's also loss anticipation. So what's likely to happen? What's the likely outcome? And the only way we know that is from what's happened in the past. Maybe we can be inspired by what somebody said. Hey, I did this, and you think, oh wow, maybe that can happen for me too. So we translate that over. But most of it's going to come from what happened in the past. Is the reward prediction. If you look at a packet of chips in a supermarket, your reward prediction is, do you think you'll like that flavor? So your reward prediction for buying plain chips versus salt and vinegar is a bit different because they taste a bit different. So you will have a choice between those two. Say, yes, that's worth it. That's not worth it. Salt and vinegar. Yeah. And so that's the first part. The first part is there are so many action options we've got all the time. This is comparing so many things and predicting so many things all the time, and we're not even aware of it. The second part is a process called valuation. And this is what's got to compare all those different options and say, well, what are we going to do? We can't do all of them. We've got to choose one. We can only buy one packet of chips. What's it going to be? Look, we've got shelves full of them. Which is the one we're going to pick? And so there are four main elements to that. One is loss over gain. The fear of loss is prioritized over the potential for gain by about 2-1. People are anxious, maybe it's more. If people are, young males high on testosterone, maybe it's a bit more level, but generally think of it as 2-1. So we react faster and more urgently, creates a bigger stress. That real or perceived or feared gap of loss of fulfillment is a strong motivator. Very likely to lead to fight-flight reactions. So it's not necessarily the best motivator, but the threat of the stick. If we talk about motivation as carrots and sticks, the stick is meaningful. We don't like it. It's unpopular to talk about it, but it's still there. It's still a consequence, and we still fear it. And there are ways as managers, and another time we can talk about how to use that in a really healthy way. So we're comparing potential for loss and gain. The potential for loss is usually quite a bit stronger than the potential for gain. So I'll protect before I enhance. The second one is intrinsic versus intrinsic, which is what's more personal to me is valued higher than what's more personal to you. So if you give me an instruction as my manager, how I feel about that and how that affects me takes priority over the instruction that you gave me. So if it's entirely compatible, no problem. But if there is a conflict that you want me to do something that really pushes me out of my comfort zone, that really makes me feel threatened and vulnerable, I want to avoid that at all costs. I'll argue, I'll blame somebody else, I'll not turn up to work. I'll do anything I can, because as much as that might seem easy and practical to you, it's a threat to me. Then we have this, and I think it is a bit arguable, but the evidence shows that big rewards are more motivational than small rewards. So if there's a big impact for more effort, that's more motivating than a small impact for small effort. Now, I'm not sure that that's entirely consistently accurate. ADHD would tell us, which increasing is telling us, no, actually, a lot of this small and easy stuff is very appealing. But ultimately, the big investment stuff where we put a lot of effort and time into something is more rewarding. It's a challenge to get to that because people do have short attention spans and are used to getting these fast rewards very easily. But that is ultimately more rewarding. But whether it's more motivating initially is probably not as reliable as the earlier research would suggest, just because our society's evolving. And the last one, sorry, I nearly forgot, is immediacy. So what is now is going to be rated higher than what's later. So if we think about kids doing homework, doing university assignments, I don't know if you remember, but most people leave it to the last minute.
Oh, vividly. I was always the last minute.
And that's really natural because it didn't matter so much then. There were other things we could do, but now it really matters. And so people cram and they do everything at the last minute. So if we look at the balance overall, we say, well, if it's about loss and it's personal and it's urgent and it's big, it's likely to have the biggest emotional impact for me, but it might be a negative impact. It could be a fight or flight reaction. But that depends on my capacity to deal with it as well, and my comfort with it, and my confidence, and all the other stresses I have in my life. So if I don't have lots of other stresses and something feels threatening, but I believe I can do something about it, I have a sense of agency, then I don't need to go to fight flight because I feel I can deal with it even though it is a threat. But if I don't feel I can deal with it, I don't feel like I control it, can understand it, can manage it, then I'm straight into fight flight stuff. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And it just tells me there's a fine line between how people react based on their behavioral, characteristics, for example, and how much motivation they can have, just depending on their personality, their individual lifestyle, how their brain function, because it's different from person to person. But as you mentioned, I think there is a very good standard rule of thumb that can be applied in the workplace by, managers and leaders. And it all completely makes sense. But I'm sure that this is a topic that we need to dive a bit deeper into our next episode. But I think now I want to talk to you about that. Let's just kind of like drives it towards a goal.
Yes. So we have stress, which is that perceived fulfillment gap. The fulfillment gap will be in a basic need. And then that leads us to, right, so what are we going to do about it? And that becomes our goal. Because until then, it's feelings, but it's not something that we can actually do anything with. And this transfers immediate. This is not something we think about. Most of the goals are based on belief and habit. They're not well thought through. People don't go, oh, I'm feeling a bit like this. What are all the practical options? Let's make a list and create a goal out of that. That's not what happens. Ideally, we could take a bit of time, use a bit of mindfulness and reflection and do some of those things, but it's just generally not what happens. So the goal is created out of belief, and beliefs don't have to be based in facts at all, and out of habits, and the habits don't have to have succeeded in the past at all. And so people fall into repeating patterns of behavior with repeating goals, whether they work or not.
So why do you think people stick to those goals stubbornly?
So in our brain, we have a thing called myelinization, which is where the synaptic connections become stronger and protected faster. And the more stressed we are, the more we go to the defaults. And they just do things the way they've done it before. to do something differently requires, hang on. I need to challenge how I react to this. I need to be aware that that's not optimal for me, and I need to challenge that and go elsewhere. And typically that's what therapists do.
Like atomic changes or atomic patterns of behavior.
Well, we've got to, those neurons are all connected and they lead to that. And that's just the highway that we always follow. Where here we've got to take some back roads. And we might have to drive over a bit of dirt and through a paddock and all these things that are really weird and uncomfortable to come to a better solution. And we don't have a street map. No one's saying, oh, this is the goal. This is what an ideal goal looks like. And here's an ideal street map to get there. It's not like navigation in your car. This is like, oh, I want to get rid of that feeling, or I want to feel like that. And it's all very approximate based on just intuitive reactions. And we don't tend to look at it and say, is that the best? Is that as good as it can be? Is it really working? Does that goal, if I was to achieve that goal, would that really give me the result I'm looking for? We don't tend to do that when it comes to our own reactions. So that's the heart of it. We are creatures of habit, and the habits are there. They're very real. And without some sort of reflective capacity, whether it's mindfulness or working with a therapist or whatever, to look back and say, is that really helping me? What might be more helpful? We're just going to continue to follow those paths. It's just what people do.
So how much conscious opportunity do we truly have to influence our own goals and behaviors? And what is the key to making those changes, being open, calm, and deliberate?
I think the first part is understanding that we are typically reactive, particularly if we're a bit distressed, and that we do follow our habits and we don't challenge our beliefs. And we do make assumptions about people and motives and situations, and they very quickly become beliefs. That's entirely normal. It's fine. It's how things work. Is it helpful? And having some time to reflect. We can't always plan because we find ourselves in situations that we just have to cope with. So ideally we'd have a plan, course of action. But we find ourselves in unfamiliar situations, and the best we can do is cope. Try to create as much space as possible. Try not to jump to conclusions. Try not to overreact and have things to regret later on. And then take some time to reflect on that and think, how did that go? Was I the person that I wanted to be? Not about whether I was justified. It's not about whether that person deserved it or that I felt attacked or whatever it was that brought out a behaviour that I'm not super proud of or that wasn't optimal. It's what could have been more helpful. It's not about judgment. It's not about seeking forgiveness. It's about going, what worked? What worked? What was helpful? When did I come across as the person I wanted to come across as? When was I influential? Or when was it helpful? When did it feel good? And what am I going to be? What am I still upset about? And having those moments for reflection without being critical. It's imagine you're talking to a best friend and they're saying, how did things go? And you're saying, well, this worked, that worked. That was a bit embarrassing for you. That was tremendous. You're doing it with compassion. You're wanting to help them. And if you can talk to yourself in the same sort of way, then it's a lot more empathetic. It's a lot more helpful conversation. There's no point walking away with guilt or foolish pride. It's the more we can just externalize it. It's about something I witnessed rather than something I did. The better opportunity we have of being objective about it, going, you know what? Yeah, I think next time that was good. I'll do that again. But this, I don't know. I allowed myself to get upset, or I got emotional, I got reactive, and then I realized I was reacting to something I didn't know about. So I felt a bit embarrassed and I had to backpedal on that. Or I took some information the wrong way. I just jumped to a conclusion. The boss told me this, or a customer told me that, or a staff member told me this. And I took that in a certain way. And I reacted to it, or I stewed upon it. But now I think about it, I actually don't know what that person meant when they said that. I don't know why they said the thing that they said. I don't know if it was actually what they meant to say. So Why am I putting so much weight in it? Because it was just the words that came out at that time. They were just coping with the situation, same as I cope with the situation. Sometimes okay, well, maybe I should just cut everyone a little bit of slack. Maybe just have a bit. So I think that creating empathy, forgiveness, taking away judgment, taking some time to reflect, that's our learning opportunity. And the more that we do that, we're going to do it when we come, the more that we can do that, the more that we're preparing ourselves for a better reaction, a better process next time.
So micro recognitions is the key.
Yeah,
As you deal with the situations, just have that moment to reflect, even a small, and then try and move on and learn.
And some people go make assumptions or jump to conclusions. No, that's what their motive was. You probably don't know your own motives. So why do you think you know why somebody else did something the way they did? It doesn't help to rush to judgment. Empathy and curiosity is so much more helpful. And if you really want to know how someone feels about something, when everything's calm and safe, ask them. It's going to be your best clue.
That is so true. I always say that no one can solve the problem for you but the person you have the problem with.
I think part of that is the problem or is the problem how we see the problem? What's the bit that upsets us the most? Is it the underlying part or is it our feelings about the underlying part? And we know through stress research that if we feel out of control and disempowered about that, the problem is very bad for us. If we feel empowered and that we have the opportunity to do something about it, the underlying problem is not that big a problem. It's just life. You know, some people say, we have no problems, we have challenges. No, we have problems. It's fine. But as long as we can deal with them, good, positive motivation. And we feel we don't understand them, can't do anything about it. So it's about how we feel about the problem that predicts well-being and, in fact, longevity. So people who feel that they're always feeling overwhelmed, they can't deal with it, are more likely to have illness and live less length of time than people who feel, yep, it's okay, we can deal with it. And the most successful people in business, I'm sure you've met the ones who go, that's okay, we can deal with that. It doesn't matter how big a problem they come, that's okay, we'll find a way. And they do.
We need some of their wisdom, you know. Yeah. Because often we put ourselves into these stressful situations and not recognizing how much toll is actually taking. As you said, the issue is not that big.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of identifying the roots of it and just chip away at it until it's solved.
Yeah.
Right. To wrap up, based on the 4-step of neurobiological flowchart that we spoke about, what is the single most important action a manager or a leader can take tomorrow to better influence their team's behavior and performance?
Okay. So we spoke about earlier, and we spoke about empowerment and enjoyable work and giving people purpose and meaning and respect and allowing them to manage their relationships and interactions. So we did that as a fundamental. Along the way, if we go back to the original starting point of stress and knowing that we don't want to have not enough stress that people need to act or so much stress that they feel overwhelmed or unable to act. Getting the right amount of stress is something we need to work with people on. And if I can use a metaphor, imagine you've got a saucepan on your stove and it's full of water. And that water's cold, the stove's not on. There's nothing happening. There's no activity, nothing's going on. Well, that's a complete lack of stress. There's nothing happening. It's boring. If that's turned up and it's just going nuts, you know, when you have a boiled egg in the water and it cracks because the water's boiling too vigorously, steam going and perhaps it's overflowing as well. You know, I don't know if you've ever poached an egg and it's just gone over the top. Yep. So that's distress. So there's too much activity happening. So what we want is we want to have, you know, simmering. We want to have all those little bubbles happening. So there is activity, but we don't want it to be too much. So and there is room. So here we are. So we've got some little bubbles forming. You can put a bit more heat in there. I can take a bit more pressure without going over the top. If I'm already very close to boiling over, I've got no capacity for anything else. So ideally, you'll want to be, and you'll want your team to be, to the best you can help them with, at that kind of low to medium simmer, and with capacity to take more on. So there is motivation. There are things to do. There are gaps that they can act on and fill, maintain, enhance, but they can take a bit more. Because if we've got them working to capacity, which a lot of managers think that everybody should be working to their capacity all the time, there's nothing left. There's nothing left. So by working with people, understanding where they're up to, keeping them challenged yet supported, keeping them empowered, have them able to say, look, it's too much for me, and make choices about that. That's the best thing we can do. And the place to start is recognizing it in ourselves. Can I give you an example? Some years ago, a client was starting a new contract in a completely new state, and it was fairly short notice that it was starting. And it was like an annually renewing contract. So we had to find a team, and this is in a semi-rural sort of area. We had to find a team that was more than bums on seats. It was people who were going to do the job today, but also who were going to be part of a positive culture and probably want to come back year after year and all those sorts of things, because it had to be done right. You can't just, go in there and then mess it up because people didn't care, and then you don't have the business next year. And I really felt the pressure of that for that client. So I actually deferred my university studies for a year because I felt that my source model was just going to boil over. I felt that I couldn't do that at the standard I needed to do it, and do that at the standard I wanted to do it, plus everything else. I thought it was just going to be too much. So I predicted the future, so that reward anticipation, oh my gosh, that's going to be too much. Prioritize, that can be deferred, unfortunately, but it can be deferred. This is urgent. This has to be right. I think that the more we can do that in ourselves, the better placed we are, and the more aware we're likely to be that other people are going through the same thing. And if in doubt, ask, can you take a bit more on? No, I'm flat out. Okay. Do you need any help? So how do we help them manage their stress? It's okay that they've got those fulfillment gaps. Totally okay. They want more authority or they want more positive feedback. That's fine, as long as they can do something about getting it. And that it's not too much all at once. And it's not too much that's unknowable, and that they do have access to resources. So that's probably the biggest takeaway. It's just working with people to keep them engaged, purposeful, accountable, without just throwing more and more on them. And I see it. And part of the biggest challenge is that there are some people who just push everything off. I don't want to take any responsibility. Not that many people, and there's a reason in their life that they feel they need to act that way to protect themselves. The one that I have more empathy for are the people who just keep taking more and more on board because they don't want to let somebody down. And when we have somebody who keeps saying, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. Maybe it's time to stop and just check in and say, it's okay. It's okay to say no. You're not letting me down if you say no. You're letting me down if you're not looking after yourself. So just being aware of, I think, those people who just keep taking more and more on board, or who might be having dramas at home. Do we need to take, because if they're already coming in close to the boil, maybe their capacity at work's a little less. So just being aware, having good relationships, not managing by numbers, you're managing people by relationships, having those open, trusting conversations where people do feel comfortable about saying, hey, give me a bit more, or no, I'm done.
I'd like to thank you very much. Every time we sit together, there's so much information that goes around the table that I feel like I need to hear more and more from you. So, for our audiences, if you'd like to gain a deeper insight on what we've discussed today and find the right assessment for your team's success and well being, head to the link in our bio or simply head to our website and get in touch. Thank you again, Michael.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Wonderful.
And
Thank you
until
so
next
much.
time, everyone enjoy.
Thank you.